maybe if we can all just be supportive of one another and understand that like everyone's situation's different, everyone's day is different, everyone's child is different, and just say, look, like, here's my experience, here's what was successful for me. It may not work for you, and that's okay, but I'm providing you with my shared experience so that you can learn from it, but don't feel obligated to do exactly what I did.
Welcome to the This Is Parenting podcast, a show devoted to sharing the roller coaster journey of parenthood from moms and dads all over the world. I'm your host, Andrea Rhodes. Information and show notes about today's episode can be found at thisisparentingpodcast.com. Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of This Is Parenting Podcast. Today, I've got a great guest. Susan Padron is joining me today. Hey, Susan, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. So we share a mutual friend, Andy Shaw, and Andy reached out to me and said that I had to talk to Susan. Susan was my go-to gal for this interview. So we connected in the online world and decided to have her come on as guest. So I'm really excited to get to know her a little bit today and talk about her parenting journey, her motherhood journey. And she has a really interesting career that I'm excited to kind of jump into as well. So we'll kind of get into all of that a little bit. Susan, why don't you tell me a little bit about you and your family, where you live, what you do, just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a personal stylist. I work primarily with women, but I also have some male clients as well. I am also a fashion stylist, which means that I do a lot of work on set, on photo shoots, and all that good stuff too. So I like having the different creative outlets for my career. I am a mom myself. I have a 4-year-old little guy who, if you follow me on social media, I refer to him as Honey Bunny. He responds to Honey Bunny, and more so than his actual name, which is pretty funny. Like he's Honey Bunny, and he knows it. I know it. It's just how it goes. And my husband, my honey bunny, and I live in New Jersey, actually just over the bridge from Philadelphia. So I'm usually in Philadelphia a lot of the time. A lot of my audience kind of associates me with Philly, but I'm currently a New Jersey resident.
Perfect. Well, let's jump in a little bit. One of the questions that I like to kind of start off with is asking how you do your bedtime routine. How crazy is that right now? Tell me a little bit about your 4-year-old and how you get him to go to sleep.
Yeah. So we usually start with, like bath time, like brushing his teeth, all that. And then we actually give him a little bit of time, like downtime on his iPad, which I know like screen time before bed's a little bit like controversial, not always recommended, whatever. But we let him have that time because we find that it just like it helps him wind down a little bit while still feeling in control. And after that, he comes into bed, we like cuddle up, we'll read between like 2 and 3 books to him. Then we'll talk about his day a little bit, just kind of like recap, and he can share with us, whatever he didn't share during the day. And after that, my husband will sing him a song. I'll sing him a song, and he usually likes to talk to me a little bit more when it's like just the two of us. And then we usually hug a whole bunch of times, and then he eventually goes to bed. So yeah, that's our routine.
That's a good routine. And, it's funny you kind of walked back the iPad part of it, right? But what I love is, I think you should just own it because you found something that works for him. And, it doesn't seem to cause him any issues. He's going to bed just fine. And I like that you are putting that in as part of his routine to give him some of that control. And that's really interesting. So, there's just so much crap about screen time, and it's just so much. There's not the right amount. Any amount is too much, and then not enough if you don't expose them to technology. So there just doesn't seem to be a win in that space right now. So I love that you just kind of own it for how it works for you and your family and your son. And I think that's great. So more power to you.
Thank you. It also helps, this is terrible, but when he's like acting out or misbehaving like around bath time, it gives us something,
To hold over his head?
yeah, to hold over his head. Like, if he's not behaving, like, because for a while we would say, okay, if you don't do this, that, or whatever, then you're going to lose a book. And at first it was, he'd respond to that. And then eventually he's like, meh, whatever, fine. I only have one book tonight, whatever. Like, he's getting that like 4-year-old attitude, that sassiness that like, I don't know where you got it. Definitely for me. But then, when that sassiness started to come into play, I was like, fine. Oh, we're going to play that game. Well, now you're going to lose your iPad. Now what? Like, bringing out the big guns. And then, like, stuff was getting real, and he was listening to mommy after that. So
yeah, I bet. Yeah, you got to find that thing they really care about. And I always hated taking books away too, because I would say it because I know that they love it, and then I'm like, damn it, I should not be taking away books. Like, that's such a good thing for them. So I got to find something else, that you feel okay about taking away that they still care about, which is hard to do. So I totally understand that struggle.
Yeah.
So tell me something that you feel is unique about your parenting journey.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so I wasn't always a stylist. When I went to school actually for music education, and I was a middle school music teacher for 7 years. And I took a year off after, like, when my son was born. And then I went back to work after those like 10, 11-ish months. And that was when I realized that I was really unhappy with my job and with teaching. And I couldn't be the best me, the best mom, the best wife, like the best teacher. It just wasn't working out because I was so unhappy. And I took some time to really like think about what I needed to be the best person that I could be and the happiest that I could be. And fashion and styling and dressing people has always been something that I've loved to do, but it was always just kind of like, whenever I would go shopping with my friends or shopping with my family, I enjoyed picking things out for them, but it was never something that I saw as a career path or even like a career option. And it wasn't until I was talking to some friends of mine, and a lot of those like clothing subscription services were really popular at the time, like Stitch Fix and Trunk Club, that they were saying to me, like, well, I like what you pick out for me more than what I get in my monthly box. That I kind of had like my light bulb moment and realized that I could actually do styling as a career. So when I dove into that and started educating myself and working with a mentor and taking classes while still teaching, I was balancing that whole full-time job plus a side hustle plus being a wife and a mom. And it was really challenging. And then when it got to the point where I felt ready to leave teaching, I was 30, 31 at the time. And I had a little guy at home. I had, my husband is also a business, like a sole business owner and entrepreneur. And I just said to him, I was like, I have to quit my job. Like, I have to quit teaching. I have to like pursue styling as my business. Like, this is what I need to do to be happy. And making that call to leave a full-time job with a regular paycheck, with benefits, with a theoretical pension, was not the responsible choice, the typical choice. I just realized I'm doing air quotes and it's a podcast, so that like typical and responsible were both meant to be in air quotes. But like, those were the choices that going the styling route was not the choice that anyone in my family really saw as the right choice, but it's what I knew I needed to do in order to, like I was saying before, be the best me and the best wife and the best mom that I could be. And it was challenging to make that transition. It's always challenging. Like, even now, like running my own business, now that I'm more established and everything, it's challenging for sure. But I am so much happier and so much of a better mental place and everything than I was when I was teaching. And every time I think about teaching, like there are some aspects that I miss, of course, about it, but I'm so grateful that I made that leap to be able to have my own schedule, as challenging as it could be and difficult as it can be sometimes, because I know that I am the best mom that I'm capable of being right now. And so much of that is because I made that big shift in my life.
So I know your son is only 4, but do you think he can sense that impact, or what kind of impact do you think that's going to have on him as he grows up?
I don't know if he was really like aware of just how unhappy I was when I was teaching, because he was so young at the time. But what I'd like to think is that now when he does look back on, you know, how his parents were growing up, that he remembers me as being happy. And, you know, when he is at a point where he can understand that, you know, both of his parents created and run their own businesses, that he sees both of us as strong role models, and that, you know, that will guide the way that he looks at women. You know, I want him to grow up to be a respectful, compassionate, open-minded man. So I want to make sure that, you know, I know that my husband will create that role model for him completely, but I want to make sure that I'm creating that role model too, so that he just doesn't view women as anything less than that, you know, if that makes any sense.
It does. It does. What would you say is something that's really challenging about parenting right now?
I mean, besides like the 4-year-old temper tantrums.
Yes, besides that.
No, the challenging thing about parenting, I guess, just making sure that the way that we're trying to parent and guide our son is in a way that we give him enough freedom to develop into his own individual, and like encourage and allow him to grow and make his own decisions, while still guiding him into becoming, you know, that open-minded, compassionate, supportive individual that we hope he will be. So, you know, trying not to hover too much, but like just give him a little bit of nudging here and there so that he can just be wonderful, like we know he will be.
I was having a similar conversation with my husband tonight, actually, and we were talking about, you know, you like to imagine your kid's future path, right? Maybe they go to college, maybe they don't, maybe they do this, maybe they don't. And it's so hard at this early stage to even know, but you kind of dream, right? Or you might make some assumptions based on what they're interested in now, or maybe something that you've seen that they are good at already. And something that my husband and I continually talk about, and we were this evening, is that college path, which I think is so interesting and it is changing a lot. And I have this a little bit of a fear of boxing my kids into that path, not wanting to, but feeling at such a default, but it's not for everybody. And the reason we were talking about it was I was listening to, I don't know if you listen to Dax Shepherds.
Okay. Yeah, just recently got into it.
Okay, so I was listening to one of his guests, really funny actor, and he was talking about how he went to Boston College and failed out of his first year. He just simply stopped going to class, and academics just wasn't his thing, even though he was quite bright and very smart. But he talked about how he would be assigned a reading assignment and he would read, but not what was assigned to him. He would read something he was more interested in. So long story short, he quits college and doesn't tell his parents. And they find out after they took him to a trip to celebrate his first completed year of college, because they were so proud of him for sticking with it. And, you know, lo and behold, he had actually dropped out. And of course, his story turns out fine. He ends up finding, you know, the comedy scene and acting, and he becomes a very successful actor. But the big part of his story was that his parents, although obviously upset that he lied to them about dropping out of college, they then were able to turn that around and pivot and support him in his next adventure. And with that being comedy, with that being acting. And so we just got into a discussion about that. And as parents, how difficult it is to set them up for success, but then at the same time know if they are going down the right path. And
Yeah.
I don't know, that it's such a tough thing, and something I think about often, even though my kids are so young, is I want to give them all the opportunity in the world, but I'm always so afraid that they'll end up going down some path that maybe isn't the best for them. But I don't know if
Yeah.
that's something that you've thought about at all.
Yeah, definitely. And my husband and I have talked about college quite a bit with like a similar approach because, I mean, especially with both of us being entrepreneurs and
Mm-hmm.
seeing, like a lot of the tribe that I've kind of surrounded myself with at this point in my life is also with a lot of entrepreneurs. And it's funny because a lot of us went to college for one thing and now are doing something completely different. And even people that I went to college with who aren't necessarily entrepreneurs have had major shifts in their career paths. And it seems like more and more that the expectations with schooling are shifting,
Mm-hmm.
and that, there are a lot of high school graduates that aren't going to college right away. And when when like we were going through schooling, that was just not even an option.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like some people went to community college right away to like figure some things out, but that was really your only alternative to going to like a 4-year college or
Sure.
something like that. And so yeah, it's interesting. I don't know that we're going to be saying to our son and in high school or even, just in the next few years, like, okay, you go through elementary school, middle school, high school, you go to college. Like it may not be that. It may
Yeah.
be you finish high school and then you take some time off, you get a job that seems appealing to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you choose to pursue something where you need that continued education, then we'll talk about college. But it's not as much of a necessity as part, it's not like another checklist on the timeline as much as it was when we were growing up.
Yeah, and it's such a weird to not be in that default mode of college, especially in my family where college education was just you will go to college. There was no option not to. That was
Yes.
very much drilled into us growing up. And so I just am trying to imagine my children coming to me like junior year saying that they don't want to go to college. And
Yeah.
I want to think that I'm going to be really cool and open-minded about it. And then I don't know. I don't know when it comes down to it. Of course, it depends on my kid and why they're saying what they're saying, of course, and the reasons behind all that. And that would change my opinion on it. But it's just a weird thing. And I'm trying to mentally prepare myself for that difficult conversation that might happen. I think it's going to happen more and more.
Yeah, likewise. We've been trying to do the same thing. And again, I think it's just that concern, like being a parent and giving that guidance and like that right amount of guidance without forcing them down the path that you think is right or society thinks is right or, whatever it is.
Yep.
And making sure that it's the right thing for your child. And that's scary.
Very. No pressure.
No pressure.
Well, what has surprised you about how you parent? Is there anything that you thought you might parent like that you actually don't do, or philosophies, or what has surprised you about how you actually get down to it?
So I was not an easy teenager. I'm aware of that. My parents still remind me of that. I'm in my 30s. And it still comes up in conversation. So when I was pregnant, I thought for sure that I was having a girl because I was like, I'm going to do my time. I'm going to get that like sassy little brat of a teenager that I was, and it's going to happen. And then we went in for an anatomy scan and it turned out that I was having a boy. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm off the hook. Like, no sassy little teenage girl to deal with later on. So what's really surprised me is that sassiness has already come out in my toddler. And it started, I guess, when he was like 2.5 or 3. And it completely caught me off guard. I don't know. I know that boys can be sassy too. And I guess I expected it like when he hit that preteen, teenage years, because, I taught middle school, so I know how that goes. But I was not expecting that to happen so young, so early. But what I also didn't expect, which I kind of like, is that his sense of humor is also developing now too. And to also help with like my sanity during some of those like sassier moments, I've incorporated my sense of humor to kind of balance it.
Sure.
So yeah, I don't think I really expected that to happen. I didn't expect like myself to just really bring in a lot of my humor into my parenting at this point, you know, with him being so young. But that's just who my husband and I are. So I don't know why I didn't expect that, because it wouldn't make sense for us to parent any other way. But it's also nice to see, and funny to see how our son just like can dish it back already, you know, like not in a disrespectful way most of the time, but it's just, I don't know, it's kind of cool.
And are your parents laughing all the way, knowing that you ended up getting that little sassy kid?
Yeah, 1000%. Yes. Like whenever we're over there and he just says something back to me in a way that, you know, I'm not laughing, like I'll hear my dad, he'll be standing like right behind me and he'll be cracking up. And, you know, and then that also kind of mellows me out a little bit, like in the moment too, because like I understand why he's laughing. I don't appreciate that my son is like saying those things to me at the time, but hearing my dad laugh, I'm like, okay, yeah, no, like I get it. This is the universe telling me like I deserve this. I know, I'm aware, like it's fine.
Oh, that must be one of the best parts about being a grandparent, is just watching this all over again, you know, and being able and not having to actually deal with the problem, but to see it from afar and just really appreciate the journey.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's probably very, very true.
One of the things we talk about on this podcast is just parenting culture and mom culture, especially since me and you are talking today. And what would you wish that there was less of in mom culture?
Oh, wow. Strong advice. I think I wish that there was less like strong advice. Whenever I'm talking to new parents or like, you know, friends of mine who are about to have a baby, I tell them that, you know, no matter what advice they read or hear, or, you know, what the internet tells them, that they need to make decisions that are best for them as a core unit and a core family. And, you know, unless it's of any kind of like major medical concern, obviously. But when it comes down to it, I think that more people need to be less caught up in what should be done or what needs to be done, and more aware of just making the right calls for them as a unit. Like it doesn't matter, even like the people closest to you, like it doesn't matter what they're telling you. If it's not the right thing for your child, for you, your partner, like don't do it. So with mom culture, I think that that's something that can get real unnecessary real fast. You know, it like there's so many different groups that are meant to be supportive for moms that just turn into all of this judgment and these harsh comments that, you know, like mom guilt is a thing. It's so much of a thing all the time. Like we put it on ourselves. I know I put it on myself constantly. And the last thing that I need is for somebody else to add to that mom guilt. Yeah. So I think, you know, maybe if we can all just be supportive of one another and understand that like everyone's situation's different, everyone's day is different, everyone's child is different, and just say, look, like here's my experience, here's what was successful for me. It may not work for you, and that's okay, but you know, I'm providing you with my shared experience so that you can learn from it, but don't feel obligated to do exactly what I did. You know, I think if more moms can kind of take that approach, then maybe we'll all feel a little bit less guilty about life in general.
Yeah. With all the interviews I've done, that's by far the most common answer. And I don't have a solution for it yet. And I don't know if we ever will have a solution, but I do think there's two sides to that coin where on the one side, I love how you're saying that it's okay to share your experience with something because it could be helpful and it might not be. And have the right tone and the right voice when you're sharing that experience.
Yeah.
on the flip side, if you're the one that's receiving that, I think it's important to understand that it may not be right for you, and then to let it go if it's not appropriate. And that's just as hard. Like, I think that's the side of the coin that doesn't get as much attention. I wish we were taught to be more confident in our decisions and our feelings or our intuition or whatever you want to call it, because I personally can get wrapped up in something that I've read or something that I've heard and try to kind of fit a square peg into a round hole when it clearly isn't the right fit for me or my family or whatever, but it feels like everybody else says that this is the way, this is the path. Yeah. And so I do wish we were a little bit more well equipped to, I don't know, maybe dissect the stuff that we're hearing and reading to kind of quickly analyze whether it's something we need to pay attention to or whether we should just let it go and not give it another thought. Yeah. I think that would go a long way.
I completely agree with you. I think that, especially when have a newborn and maybe it's like your first kid and you're getting all of these different words of advice and guidance that you're trying to apply and you're feeling obligated to apply. I think that you're totally right by saying that we just also need to understand how to let it go if it doesn't work for us, that we're not going to disappoint anybody, that it's not our fault if it doesn't work. It's not our kid's fault if it doesn't work. It's just not the right thing. And you just understand that, recognize it, and then move on.
Yeah, I don't know about you because you've got the 4-year-old. I've got an almost 7 and an almost 4-year-old, and I think and maybe part of it's my age. I'm just getting to a point now where I can kind of cut through the bullshit and get there, a lot faster than whenever you first have a kid and you kind of hang your hat on everything that everybody tells you. I don't get wrapped up in it nearly as much, and it feels so good, just so much more freedom where I'm kind of making my own decision and having my own judgment on the things that I'm hearing and seeing, and I can kind of cut through the clutter a lot faster.
Yeah, I totally feel the same way about my life and my decisions, as well as my parenting style too. And I feel like part of that is, with the fact that my son's a little bit older, I'm a little bit older, yep. And that, all the shifts in my career and the decisions that I had to make there also helped me understand that sometimes I need to tune out the noise and just focus on what's in front of me.
Totally. So for those that are listening that maybe are just joining this parenting journey, no, it does get better and it does get easier, but hopefully by hearing these types of conversations and stories that somebody in that situation might get there a little faster, knowing that they actually have the power to make good decisions.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's talk a little bit about you and your husband. What do you guys disagree about as a partner, as a united front? How do you guys ever disagree on how you parent your son?
That's a good question. I don't know. We usually see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. But I think we have different approaches sometimes where, if one of us kind of comes into the situation a little bit later and sees that the other's kind of struggling with something going on with our son, the person that just walks in might try to act as reinforcement in a way. And I think that we both kind of take on that role differently. When I come in as reinforcement, obviously we both come in initially with being Bunny, you need to listen to your mother, or you need to listen to your father. But I think that I'll come in and try to diffuse the situation and kind of get him to shift or get our son to shift or pivot a little bit rather than continuing to add fuel to the fire, while my husband will come into that situation and act as more of the badder cop, which sometimes is helpful. Sometimes it's not, though. I'm just no, I got this, go away. Please, nope. Now he's mad at both of us, where I was fine if he would just be mad at me. I don't need him mad at both of us, because now it's just we're done. yeah, I think that role is the last minute enforcer can become a little bit of an issue.
Does that bad cop, good cop role come up a lot?
Not a ton, because I think we both trade off a lot. So it's not so much that like one of us is always good cop, one of us is always bad cop. It's, I don't know. It's mainly just in those like those, situations where like one of us has just come home from work and sees that we've walked into like a little bit of a shit show. It's like, okay, so how do we handle this?
You could go back to your pre-kid self and give yourself some parenting advice. What would it be?
Oh, I guess, I don't know. That's a tough one. I think to not get so caught up in what people who are close to you say early on, like when you're home from the hospital, like during that first year, to just, go back to focusing in on like, what's right for just the three of you. Mm. Because, like I had my mom and my sister as role models, and they're still great role models, but we're just, the three of us are really different. Mm. And especially when we were dealing with like those first 3 months, even, it was really, really hard. And I was trying to, I was reaching out to them because, they're like your core people. And what they were telling me just wasn't working. And I felt like I was just like banging my head against the wall, trying to make it work when it wasn't. So I think if I could go back to like my pre-kid self or my pre-newborn self and just be like, it's okay to love and respect. You will always love and respect your mom and your sister, but you will not be the same mom that they are. And that's okay. And it doesn't say anything bad about you or about your relationship with them or about them. It's just that, like, all aspects of you, you're different than they are, and that's okay.
Yep, I totally agree. The first kid in the first year is just brutal. Yeah. I've said this a billion times on the show, but you just cannot be prepared for what's coming. You can read all the books and listen to all the things and hear all the advice. And ultimately, when you get handed that kid, all of that goes out the window because it's completely different and unique to your situation. Yeah. So yeah, it's such a tricky high wire act that we walk because there's so much sage advice from people who've been there before us. So you want to be open to taking that into consideration. And then at the same time, especially with a new baby, when it's not working, everything is just so heightened and it feels just so important to get it right and to get it right fast. It seems like everything's on the line and to kind of just slow down, which is hard with the first one, to slow down and take a step back and kind of figure out what works for you is kind of the best way to figure out what's going to work in the future too.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like between the lack of sleep, the hormones, the like, like our son was a crier a lot, like lots of colic, like it was bad in those first few months. And so between like all of that and plus like both of us being stressed, that trying to find the mental capacity to just like, take that step back, I think is just so challenging.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I felt like the resources that I needed about, like mental health and self-care and all of that, I'm sure that they were available to me during that time, but it didn't seem like until I started to come out of it that I became more aware of them. And it was still helpful at that point, but I think that maybe even just having more of an emphasis on the importance of self-care and mental health, like right away after the baby's born, like making that more available for pregnant women or women who are thinking about having kids, I think is really crucial. And hopefully not everybody needs it, but at least just making it available and accessible, like as part of, the baby classes that are available to you, like throwing that in there as well, and not in like a sarcastic way, not like, oh, make sure mom goes and like gets a massage once in a while. It's like, no, like, but there's a lot of importance to self-care, and it doesn't have to be like, once a year for Mother's Day when, you give mom like a day off or whatever. It's like, it should just be a natural part of your life where you incorporate different elements of self-care.
Yeah, you're speaking my language because we just do not do a good job of that. The checks and balances for post care with moms is non-existent. And it's something that, again, through these interviews, it's a common thread through almost everybody I've chatted with, that to some level, from a low level issue all the way up to severe postpartum depression and psychosis, that we are slipping through the cracks. And something has to change with that, with the checks and balances. I think we just historically are so focused on the baby, and we have plenty of checks and balances with baby. I mean, we are counting their shits. I mean, we're not letting anything pass us. And then we aren't actually checking in on ourselves, and no one's doing that for us. Something has to change with that. I couldn't agree more. It's definitely a problem. And I think it really sets moms up for a rough first part of this journey, and it's really tough to come out of when you start at such a low point.
Yeah. And I remember like when I was going in for my checkups with my OBGYN after my son was born, you get that like survey, that like postpartum survey that is literally like, I don't know, 4 questions on it. And like none of those 4 questions felt like they applied to how I was feeling, but I knew that how I was feeling was still not okay. And that was really disheartening because like I didn't know how to bring that up to my OB like during those appointments.
Yeah, I flat out lied on my questionnaire.
Yeah, that too. And because it's like, it's not even discussed. It's like, oh yeah, here's this piece of paper, like while you're getting changed, like fill it out and whatever. We'll look it over. Maybe like a nurse practitioner like glances at it or whatever. And it's like, okay, cool. And then it's like, that's it. That's it. We're left to, deal with whatever state our mental health is currently in.
Yeah.
It's just, I completely agree with what you were saying before about how the mental care of new moms is just not what it should be and not up to par.
We can do better.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, Susan, thank you so much for joining us. One last question. Does your son ever help you style your clients?
No, unfortunately. He hasn't come along on like any of my sessions or my appointments just yet.
I was going to say not yet.
Yeah, but I'll probably turn him into like my little assistant. I am also guilty of not really letting him select what he wears yet either.
Keeping that control for as long as you can, right?
Yeah, like I feel like such a hypocrite because before I was saying like I just guide him and like let him make his own decisions. It should have been like, a little footnote like unless it's what he decides to wear, because I'm like, so help me if he wants to wear like, I don't know, something that I'm just like,
he's gonna rebel on that for sure.
Yeah, and when he does, that's fine. But in the meantime, while I still have that control, I'm like riding that wave for as long as it'll take me.
So he's still willing to let you pick out his clothes, right?
Yeah.
My 7-year-old still is. So hopefully, you'll hold out there.
That gives me hope. Yeah. Yes. My parents just, oh my gosh, they thought I was like such a little bitch when he was first born, because they would pick out clothes for him and like give them to me, and I would thank them and be like, I appreciate this, but he's never going to wear it. I will never put him in this. And then I was like, please don't, like, he's not the same as my nephews. Like, he just doesn't like, I don't like those things. He may like them, whatever. He doesn't get a say right now, and that's fine.
Well, thank you so much for coming. Why don't you share with everybody where they can find you and check out your services if they're interested? And I've been checking your stuff out, and it's fabulous. So if
Oh,
you're
thank you.
interested in being styled, you need to go check out her website and her Instagram. So why don't you share with everybody where you're at?
Yeah, so my website is susanpadronstylist.com. And my Instagram is Susan Padron _stylist. I'm on Facebook and Pinterest as well, but if you really want to see what I'm doing on a regular basis, then my Instagram is definitely where it's at.
Thank you, Susan Padron, for stopping by. If you want to follow Susan on social media, or if you are interested in learning more about her styling services, then check out the show notes at thisisparentingpodcast.com. I've linked all of the goodies right there. And don't forget to leave a rating and review for the podcast. I will see you next week.